Hello, hello. Thank you for joining. I'm your
Hey,
host, Alexandra Maloney, and I hope that everyone is staying safe and lifted during this time. I'm the host of the PIA Chats, and the purpose of this series is to share the experiences and insights of members of the international affairs community and hopefully inspire the next generation to explore opportunities in the field. Also, the thoughts and views of our guest speakers are their own and do not reflect the views of BPIA. We are currently streaming live, and this talk will be posted on our IGTV and our YouTube channel afterwards. So if you haven't already, please follow Black Professionals in International Affairs at IABPIA, as well as our guest speaker whose handle can be found on their flyer on our page. And lastly, we encourage viewers to chime in below in the thread with comments and questions that you may have. So without further ado, I will introduce our guest speaker. Otis Holloway is a stabilization advisor with the Africa Office of the U.S. State Department, Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operations. Since joining CSO, originally as a contractor, Otis has helped facilitate U.S. Embassy Nairobi's observation of the 2017 Kenyan elections and assessed violence risks associated with electoral processes in Africa's two most populous nations, Nigeria and Ethiopia. He has also served on a joint CSO and Department of Defense mission in Djibouti to establish a baseline understanding of the threat of extremism in the nation. Prior to joining the State Department, Otis worked for the City of Atlanta Mayor's Office of Constituent Services and interned at the U.S. Treasury's Office of Multilateral Development Bank. Otis also completed a Boren Fellowship in Mozambique, where he interned with the development NGO and learned Portuguese. Originally from Douglasville, Georgia, Otis earned his BA in political science from Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. While at Trinity, he studied abroad at the University of Cape Town in South Africa, which stimulated his interest in international relations. Otis earned his MA in International Peace and Conflict Resolution from American University. Thank you so much, Otis, for joining us today.
thank you for having me, Alex. I appreciate it. Shout out to Black Professionals in International Affairs. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Otis. So could you start off by sharing how the COVID-19 situation is affecting the work that you do?
Sure. It's a lot. So I focus on Africa itself. Well, maybe let me back up and just talk about my job itself. So I work with the State Department. This is the foreign affairs arm of the U.S. government. So anything that relates to our relations with another country, it usually has to go through the State Department. So this is peace agreements, trade relations, or anything like that. But also, we have a lot of embassies throughout the world in most countries. So these countries, they have the embassies and the consulates, and their number one priority is American citizens abroad. So these are passport services. So if anybody has any issues with like legality in a country, or you might lose your passport, it's your best bet to go to the embassy or to call the embassy if you're in an emergency. So I work with the Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operations, also known as CSO, as Alex so wonderfully said. And at CSO, we focus on trying to prevent, mitigate, or resolve conflicts of U.S. national security priority. So with this type of work, COVID is affecting us, one, because we can't go to these different countries. We also have programs in these different countries that can't do activities because everyone is social distancing. Even though I focus on Africa, my bureau itself, we are throughout the world. So it's definitely been a struggle. And even for policymakers, for the host government and the United States itself, we're really thinking about less developed countries than our own, as well as Europe, thinking into, for Africa, for example, even though they're social distancing, the testing capacity isn't there. The health system isn't the same as it is in most first world countries. even though they have a youthful population, and we know COVID is most, it attacks vulnerable elderly people the most, we still don't know how to best attack this situation. So it's something that's affecting all of our work and is affecting day-to-day activities for sure.
Thank you for that. For those who are just joining, we're here with Otis Holloway, who's with the Africa Office of the U.S. State Department Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operations. So feel free to drop any comments or questions that you have in the thread. My next question, so what does a typical day look like for you pre the COVID situation?
Typical day, a lot of it is
non-stop. Non-stop and busy.
Right, definitely. All types of, well, program management for one, as I mentioned, making sure that our programs are effective and are pivoting to match with the political dynamics or the social dynamics in the country. Other than that, it's a lot of people in my bureau, we actually deploy a lot. So we do temporary duties abroad. So this may be helping out developing scenario planning for the embassy or with the embassy. And this may also involve just doing work in Washington. So the day-to-day, we're briefing people in the interagency, including people in the State Department, Department of Defense, USAID, and NGOs about the political dynamics we just experienced from being abroad in the field, but then coming back and then drafting those up for policy and helping out with talking points for our senior officials. And then even when we're abroad, we do a lot of writing, reporting back to Washington, so everyone in Washington knows what's going on in countries.
Great, thank you. Could you tell us more about what's originally sparked your interest in international affairs?
It started back before undergrad, and I was just thinking before I went to Trinity College in Connecticut that I definitely wanted to study abroad. And when I had the opportunity and I learned about the different possibilities, what programs were there, I wanted to focus on Africa just because I felt like Europe was a place that I might be able to easily get around, or I might be easily able to go to. Versus Africa, I didn't feel like there would be another system set up for me where I would have a coordinator, I might have a host family to support me while I'm in Africa trying to move around when I don't know anyone. So that's what sparked my interest, but it was doing the study abroad in South Africa, really enjoying that experience and making friends there, taking classes with different students, and then also being able to read about the political and social dynamics there, to hear about it from different people, to intern there, and then also to compare those experiences with things I've experienced in the United States.
Thank you for that. So on the topic of, mitigating conflict abroad, what skill set do you think are most important for individuals who want to go into this line of work?
Well, not to sound cliche, but you have to have like a diplomatic personality. With that being said, you have to be open to different opinions or different perspectives, really understanding another person's point of view. That goes a long way. You want to develop your writing skills, being able to start with your bottom line up front, be able to like really articulate what matters and what we could do about a certain situation, and also being able to demonstrate your past effectiveness and your future effectiveness. And then, of course, language skills. When you're interested in international affairs, people want to know, can you speak a language? And people assume that you speak another language. So those are three of the top things that I would say.
All right, thank you for that. I see we have a few more people who have joined. We're here with Otis Holloway, who is with the Africa Office of the U.S. State Department's Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operations. So thank you everyone for joining, and continue to, put your comments. We're seeing, I see you have some fans out here. Hey, Otis. Keep it, let's go, Otis. Hashtag the Alpha Man. So we have one question from one of our BPI board members, Vannery. She says, what's your favorite experience working overseas?
Yeah, so it's difficult to say. I would have to say Nigeria, just because I spent the most time over there. And I was able to really make meaningful relationships with people there, as far as major stakeholders, from politicians up to the governor level, religious leaders, people in different civil society levels, different civil society organizations, university students, basically all types of people that could help me get knowledge and could pass along different information so that we could figure out together how to best support. I would definitely say Nigeria. It was just being alone there, and so I'm a civil servant versus a foreign service officer. Even though I am a diplomat, especially when I go abroad to do this type of work, I'm based in Washington, D.C., and there's a lot of foreign service officers that work abroad 2 to 3 years, and then they switch locations. Where I go abroad, and I temporarily go from 2 weeks to possibly up to a year and a half in a different country.
Thank you for that. What would you say that you like most about your work?
I like a lot of.
That can be kind of a challenging question because it's,
right.
It's very serious and sometimes dense work.
Right. I really like meeting people, man. Even like start off. I think my first time as a tourist abroad was Dominican Republic, and I stayed on a resort, and I didn't enjoy that too much. Largely because I wasn't, interacting with people. I didn't know too many people on the ground. I weren't able to hang out with locals other than people that were resort staff. So being able to really engage with people, finding out their concerns, what their interests are, that's one. Traveling, of course, and then also being seen as a subject matter expert on different topics. Being able to brief individuals from Congress, the intelligence community. This is like CIA, National Security Agency, USA partners, as well as senior level officials, just being able to tell them what's the political dynamics and possibly provide recommendations on how the United States government should move forward. I really enjoy that.
Can you tell us more about your experience with the Boren Fellowship and maybe any advice that you may have for students who are interested in that program?
Sure. So the Boren Fellowship is a United States government program that allows students or recent graduates to go abroad and learn a different language. It's funded by the government, and once you finish your program, which can last, it's usually up to a year, and this for undergrads as well as graduate students. And once you finish your program, not only do you have this language proficiency, but you come in and a lot of people know what the Boren Fellowship is. So your name goes to the top of the pile because you have basically it's marked. Your resume is marked because you have and it's easy for you to get in to the U.S. government. And there's a requirement that you serve in the U.S. government. So if you're interested in working for the United States government, especially international affairs, Boren is almost a win-win for you because you develop the language proficiency and you also have a leg up on the competition because of the special marker that you have with the Boren Fellowship.
Thank you for that. For those who are just joining, we're here with Otis Holloway, who's with the Africa office at the State Department's Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operations. So if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to put them in the thread below. And my next question is, what's the best professional decision you've made in your career path?
I would say the Boren is definitely up there. And then to attend graduate school, and then as part of my graduate school experience, taking the Boren, I would say both of those. And while I was in grad school, I had a Treasury internship, which I'm sure made my resume or my application package more alluring to hiring officials at the State Department as well as the Boren Fellowship itself, because you have to demonstrate why you're eligible for this program and how do we know that you're interested in international affairs, and then you'll continue to carry out your requirement as far as working with the U.S. government.
Great, thank you. We have a question here from one of our previous speakers, Byron L. Williams. Shout out to you, Byron. And his question is, could you remind us which language you learned with Boren and what professional reason did you have for choosing that particular language?
That's a good question. So I chose to study Portuguese in Mozambique. So I studied abroad in South Africa in undergrad, and I visited Mozambique briefly. But as far as application-wise, why Mozambique and why Portuguese? Because there was a discovery, a large deposit of oil and natural gas off the coast of Mozambique. So automatically we see, well, most people would see that as relevant to U.S. national security, because these are a place where U.S. companies could go in and explore these resources and work with the host government or the host or different host companies to employ people there, but also employ a lot of Americans. So it was a huge opportunity. So for me, I saw that as a national security issue, and then also the fact that I chose the language because I always wanted to focus on either sub-Saharan Africa or Latin America, and I was choosing between Swahili and Portuguese, and I felt like Portuguese would allow me to do both, because not only do they speak it in Portugal, but they speak it in Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, Angola, Cape Verde, as well as Brazil, which is probably the largest economic power in Latin America. So I thought it would be the best choice, and it would broaden my horizons, whereas Swahili would only keep me limited to the Great Lakes. With that being said, Swahili is a great language to learn.
Thank you for that. Thank you. My next question is there anything that you know now that you wish you would have known when you first started this career path?
Plenty, of course. But sure, definitely just usajobs.gov, because there are endless opportunities for all people, but even people in high school or just graduated high school, you can start out with a student trainee position or get an internship. And with this website, usajobs.gov, I didn't know that you can get a pathways internship, which is a paid internship with the U.S. government, and you're likely to convert that position into a full-time position that's no longer an internship. So it's the Pathways Internship Program, the Pathways Recent Graduates Program. I didn't know too many ways to get into the State Department in the civil service until grad school. So for foreign service officers, especially those of color, you have the Pickering and Rangel scholarships and fellowships, which people should look into. And then but for civil service folks, there's not really a way other than pathways internships. And people do unpaid student internships, and those offer opportunities to do work abroad at the different embassies. But for those who might not have the same circumstances to work abroad without receiving pay, there's other internships out there that would definitely prepare you for this type of role. One is CBC, Congressional Black Caucus internships. A lot of them are focused on international affairs or just government in general. You also have the Critical Language Scholarship. So similar to the Boren, it's a language of national security importance. So it's not your typical Latin languages, but it's focused on possibly Korean or Farsi, which they speak in Iran, and other strategic language like that, such as Mandarin. So those are some of the opportunities that people should definitely look into, and what I definitely wish I knew back in college. There's also another one, Washington Center. They offer a lot of different scholarships and internships that people that are interested in not only international affairs, but government in general should definitely look into.
Thank you for sharing those resources. I agree. I think when I made it to kind of the graduate school space, that's when I started to learn more about all these different programs and fellowships, and that there are more than one way just to get into, federal government, and specifically federal agencies.
Right.
So I would definitely advise the students that may be on the call that are interested in exploring different federal agency and foreign affairs opportunities. Absolutely look at all of those websites, usajobs.gov, for more, and kind of follow the wave on those sites and the timelines. So I'm going to take one more question from the thread, and then I'll ask a concluding question. And the next question is, what is your 1 to 5 year goal, and where do you see yourself around then? I'm curious to know this as well. What does the future hold for Mr. Otis Holloway?
That's a good question. Yeah, a lot of us, especially during COVID, it's easy to focus in on the day-to-day grind versus really taking a longer term approach. And even with my current job, where we're not as funded as some of our partners in the interagency, we have to focus on quick wins and versus something long term, maybe 5 year, 10 years. So it's definitely something that I don't often, the job doesn't offer too many opportunities to look into. But for me, I would definitely say making meaningful impact, moving up the ladder within government or possibly outside of government, but just making sure that there's a bridge between the United States, the people of the United States versus the government and those that live abroad. As far as how can we as civil society members or individuals work together to create better policies and better process for the common good, especially working class people and poor people. How do we create a more equitable society for everyone?
Thank you.
And then also because that was my fraternity brother that asked that tough question, interviewing me and whatnot. Okay. But
shout out to Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity in the building.
Yes. So, at the end of the day, I am a millennial, right? So a lot of us have side hustles or side gigs. So I think for me, it's also developing that passion, because we all are multifaceted individuals. We have different interests. So we should definitely explore all of those other artistic talents or entrepreneurial spirit that we have.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So the last question that I'll ask, and feel free to put any concluding thought into this as well, but what advice would you give to someone who is considering this line of work or entering this field?
I would say first and foremost, developing your financial literacy skills. Just making that segue back. My side hustle, my side gig is financial literacy and teaching that to different people. But I feel like if you want to go into international affairs field and you want to work for the government, and anybody in general, but think if it's necessary for you to take out student loans, maybe develop your skills or try to get in positions where you could build your capacity, where you could demonstrate how you will be an effective worker in the field versus taking out student loans and not really being sure about the economic output of the position that you want at the time. So similar to the skills, developing writing skills, developing your language proficiency, working on articulating your thoughts clearly, communicating effectively, and then also making sure that you're critiquing yourself in almost every interactions that you experience. And, sometimes we're quick to blame a situation. It usually works better when we try to critique ourselves because that's something that we could actually fix or improve on, versus worrying about the situation around us. So what can we focus on to make ourselves better?
Thank you so much, Otis, for those words and nuggets of wisdom, and thank you for speaking to us today. What's the best way for folks to reach out or find you that may want to follow your journey?
Hey, yes. So Instagram, OJ Holloway, OJ.Holloway, and reach out. I'll send my information to you, Alex, to make sure everyone can have it. So yeah, I think that's the best way. I'm also on LinkedIn. Yes, I'm on LinkedIn. Otis J. Holloway, I believe. I should be on there.
All righty. Thank you so much, Otis, and thank you everyone for joining today. And we look forward to seeing you all at future BPIA Chat. Have a good day, everyone.
All right, have a good one.
All right.